this exercise is going to be leg extensions on the machine. Now I'm going to show you the basic and standard way you would normally do this, and then maybe some variations that could help you or just change up the exercise. So for the most part, this one's very simple. There's very little to adjust there. On this machine, I can adjust how far back my ankles and my legs will be starting. Now, I recommend trying to start in the deepest stretch that you possibly can. So some machines allow you to crank this back, and I would recommend trying to max that out if possible. Now, if your knee hurts whenever you're running this, you may just have too much pressure on the knee at that time because it's not strong enough to handle it, and then you just need to have some shallower reps where you may start here and work up from that point. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this so that way I'm working out of a great big stretch. You're going to swing your feet underneath the bar, and you want to make sure that wherever you are seated in your machine, that your knees are lining up with the pivot point here. Some gyms it's a circle, some gyms it's a dot, but either way you need to try to line up with it. For the most part, that's going to be your best place to be. Now I have seen some machines where you wanted to get off of the dot just a little bit so it was more comfortable to use the machine, but try to stick to staying with the pivot point. Now, once I have this position here and I have my pivot point lined up, I can take my backrest and I can pull it up so that way I have support for my low back. Now I may change that depending on the variation, but that again is your standard. So from this point, I just want to make sure I'm leaning back. I'm holding my handles down, that way I don't allow my butt to raise up as I lift the weight, because if it gets heavy enough, you might lift your butt up and you might seesaw, and now you're losing a lot of force production, a lot of work that you otherwise would have had. So I'm going to make sure I hold my handles, and from this point, lift up as high as I can. I don't have to go to a perfectly locked out position, but high enough to make sure I'm getting comfortable work here. Sometimes if you go all the way up, this could be a little bit problematic in the knees, and you don't get that much more benefit out of it. So for myself, I go maybe 3/4 of the way up and just make sure I come all the way back into my stretch where the weight is almost touched back down. Now, there's a couple things that I can play with here, like my foot position. I can crank my toes up and wrap around this pad. This will give me a little bit of tibialis work, and I might get a better contraction through my quads. Or I can point out. This may end up being more comfortable on your knees because maybe you have too much tension coming from down here. So I've seen people just point out, and it's a lot more comfortable, as long as you keep that part consistent. Now the next part is going to be taking my toes out or in. If I roll my toes out, I'm going to put just a bit more emphasis on the medial portion of this quad, and this is where a lot of people are weak, so I would highly recommend trying it. And you're going to keep what I call duck feet. Keep your feet turned out, make sure they're even from left to right, and your thighs are slightly turned out. You should get a lot more burn, a lot more feel through this portion here, that medial portion. If I turn in and squeeze my thighs and go pigeon-toed, I'm going to see a lot more work on the lateral portions of my thighs. And you just want to play with these for knee comfort and where you're trying to focus on building. Now for some other variations, if I need to get more stretch out of this, maybe it's not stretching enough for me because some machines don't crank back very far, I can always set my back to push my knees up further past the pivot point. Now be aware you're putting more pressure on your knees. So if they're not strong enough to handle this, your knees will tell you really quickly and maybe you need to back off some. But I'm going to move past the pivot point, so I'm starting in an even greater knee stretch here. And then I'm going to need to make sure that I have a way of locking myself down. So either handles, in my case I can hold this bar, and as I go up I can get much bigger stretch out of this. Now if I wanted to make this more akin to like laying down, I could move up and then lean back, and I can get a greater stretch out of the upper portion of my thighs. It's going to be a pretty small difference, but it's a difference nonetheless. And one thing that I've been really liking to do is to lean all the way forward and keep my abdominals tight. That way my pelvis is positioned the way I need to. And this works really well if you get back pain when you lift up, because sometimes your hamstrings will pull taut and it may yank on your pelvis and your lower back. So if you lean forward and keep your abs really tight, you'll get just a slightly different feel, but it will keep your hamstrings a little happier.